Finding truth. I followed the 2 security workers who had called me for help to a grey door. In my black jogging pants with the olive green t-shirt and the black hoodie I had thrown on when they rang me out of bed, I was still freezing. The rubber soles of our street shoes made squeaking noises on the linoleum floor. The grey door looked like it led to a broom cupboard, but behind it I heard yelling and rumbling. The 2 men, dressed in blue jeans and t-shirts as if they had been called out of some family activity, signed me to stand back. They first knocked, and when this was ignored, hammered on the door. I heard a man's voice dangerously growling at them from the inside. "Leave me alone." The security guards banged at the door once again, asking the man inside to open it. This time he yelled in a low, distorted sound, "I told you to go away!" All of us had realized by now that talking was not a way to get through to the person behind the door. One of the men in front of the grey door, the blonde one wearing a white shirt, reached out for the handle. The black-haired bearded man wearing a red shirt positioned himself behind his colleague, ready to step in for defense if necessary. The first man grabbed the handle and pressed it down. The door was locked. He jumped backwards when his attempt to enter was regarded with a loud thud against the door from the inside. The black-haired man asked me if I had a key, which I denied. The 2 security guards threw each other a look and nodded. Then they positioned themselves as they had before, only with a bit more distance to the door. The man in front, wearing the white shirt, slightly bent his knees, tensed his muscles, and kicked down the grey door that was separating us from the raging person inside. I heard more indefinite yelling and rumbling, while I saw the 2 men in their blue jeans vanishing inside the room. Carefully I stepped up and peeked beyond the threshold, where I saw a tiny room, indeed the size of a broom cupboard. A shelf on the wall opposite the door contained a couple of trinkets and some books. To the left was a bed with red covers. Left of the door, on the same wall as the threshold, a dirty white sink with some soap and a towel. That was it. No window, the only light coming from the hall through the now open door. Well, that was not quite it, because in the middle of the room stood Ronan, a wild look on his bearded face, wielding a bloody, rusty sword that he clutched with both hands. He wore black jeans and no shirt. On his sweaty torso I saw deep cuts that were bleeding. He must have hurt himself while brandishing the sword. While I was still struggling to fathom what I was looking at, the security guard in the red shirt stumbled backwards against the open door now leaning on the wall opposite the bed. The security guard in the white shirt tumbled in the same direction and made a turn towards the threshold I was standing in to not bump into his colleague. To get out of harm's way, I ducked under the left arm of the blonde security guard while sidling into the room, making myself as thin as possible between the sink and Ronan's sword, to then climb onto the bed and cower in the corner furthest away from the fight. This was all wrong. Panic rose inside me and I just wanted to get away. I had got in the line of fire before and carried away major injuries. There was no way I would go through anything like that ever again. Then I saw Ronan coming at the 2 security guards who didn't stand a chance against his terrible rage. While swinging his sword, he kept cutting himself. The 2 men in their blue jeans looked terrified now. Ronan towered over the man in the white shirt and lifted his sword. I cried out, "Ronan!" He turned around, looking at me with madness, his grey-blue eyes gleaming under his scruffy dark mane, a mix of dark brown, auburn and streaks of grey. Then he hesitated for the blink of an eye. That was the moment when I jumped up to stand in front of him. My hands softly wrapped around his bloody fists that were still holding the sword, I whispered emphatically, "Ronan, you need to stop. Please stop. See, you're hurting yourself, and you're going to hurt us. Ronan looked at me without seeing and kept muttering. Truth. Need to find truth. Sword is truth. Need to use it. Need to cut off all lies. Need to cut everything. Still softly holding his fists that were still clinging to the sword, I looked at his face, seeking eye contact, and said, The sword of truth, yes, it cuts away the lies. But that doesn't mean you have to cut away everything. My voice sounded calm and steady, which surprised me, as I was still fighting down the rising panic in me. It felt like my stomach tried to turn around, and I wondered if I would have to throw up. Ronan lowered the sword, my hand still resting on his. Recognition flickered in his eyes, but he still didn't really seem to see me. His muscles softened, though. I kept holding his hands, incrementally moved backwards, and he allowed me to lead him towards the bed. When I sat down, he let himself sink next to me. Staring at the sword, he muttered, But the blade, the sword has a blade. I reached for the towel by the sink, held an end under warm water, and began to gently dab one of the wounds on his right shoulder. Yes, I said, the sword has a blade. It even has 2 blades, which is why you can hurt yourself when you cut away too much, see? Ronan allowed me to continue to clean his wounds on his torso. Still staring at the sword that was now lying across his knees, he conveyed, But I don't know what to do. His voice sounded clearer now, just desperate. I placed my left hand onto his right hand, which rested on the pommel of the sword, and for a while we remained silent. Then I reached for the blade of the sword to wipe off some blood and rust until a spot of shiny steel became visible. Look, I pointed out. If you polish the blade, the truth can reflect back to you. Cut away what doesn't reflect true, but cherish which reflects true. You cannot find the truth if you cut yourself off of it. As we both sat there shoulder to shoulder on the bed with the red covers in that windowless cell, looking at the blade of the sword on Ronan's knees, our eyes met in the reflection of the spot of shiny steel. Taking the towel from my right hand, Ronan began to clean the sword before he polished its blade. Holding my gaze in the reflection, he asked, "What do I do with it?" I remembered the legend of Excalibur and how it was given back to the lake at the end. "Integrate it," I replied. Ronan turned his head to face me and looked me straight in the eyes with full awareness. Supporting himself with his right hand on the bed, he reached for my face with his left, his fingers interlacing with my medium brown curls. Under his full beard, I could make out a smile, while the wrinkles around his eyes lifted. When he gently pulled me closer, the sword had vanished. I had never felt so tired in my entire life. I rested my head on Ronan's chest and allowed his embrace to keep me warm. His tender breath brushed my ear as he whispered softly in his low voice, "Thank you." But I was the one who was grateful that my friend had not got lost in the darkness. "Let's go," I said after a while. Ronan pulled a long-sleeved plaid shirt in blue, grey and white out from under the bed covers and slipped it on. After helping me up, he wrapped his right arm around me. My left arm wound around his lower back, while my right hand rested against his chest, his left hand firmly covering my right one. He was so much taller than me. Holding each other steady, we walked out of the dark cell, through the dazzlingly bright hall, and took the next exit just in time to see the placid dawn of a new morning.